Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you share and, well, we unpack them together.
That's right.
Today, we're diving deep into some really rich material you sent over, all focused on anthropology, which is, it's a huge field, right?
Absolutely. Sprawling, really.
So our mission today is to try and get to grips with what anthropology actually is, where did it come from, what are its main parts, and, why does studying humanity this way matter so much?
It's going to be interesting. We'll be touching on everything from human behavior and biology to cultures, societies, language.
Across time and space, no less.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating, I think, is just how broad it is. The source material shows it pulling from so many different places.
Yeah.
We're going to try and connect some dots for you that might seem pretty far apart at first glance.
Okay, sounds good. Let's start right at the top then. According to the source, what is anthropology at its heart? What's the core idea?
Well, at its most basic level, it's defined as the scientific study of humanity. Simple enough, right?
Seems straightforward.
But the complexity comes in because it's concerned with pretty much everything human. Behavior, biology, cultures, societies, language.
Okay.
And crucially, it looks at these things both now, in the present, and in the past, including, archaic humans. Way back.
So it's not just like digging up ancient ruins or only studying remote tribes today.
No, not at all. It aims to be much more holistic than that. That idea of holism, looking at the whole picture, is really key here.
Right.
And the source material breaks this down into main components, or branches, you could call them, especially how it's often set up in North America and Asia.
And what are the main branches?
So you've got sociocultural, then linguistic, then biological, or sometimes called physical anthropology, and finally, archaeology.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about each one? How do they fit together?
Sure. Sociocultural anthropology, well, it kind of combines two older strands. Social anthropology, which often focuses on patterns of behavior like social structures, kinship, politics.
How people organize themselves.
Exactly. And cultural anthropology, which leans more towards understanding cultural meaning, beliefs, values, symbols, how people make sense of their world. They often merged now, but that's the basic idea.
Makes sense. And linguistic.
Linguistic anthropology looks at language, but not just grammar and vocabulary. It explores how language shapes and is shaped by social life, how it influences thought, culture, power dynamics. Really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Biological or physical?
That's about us as biological organisms. So human evolution, our relationship to other primates, human variation, genetics, health, adaptation to environments.
The physical side of being human.
Precisely. And then archaeology.
That's the digging part, right? Finding old stuff.
Well, yes, often involves digging. But it's the study of past human activity through the physical evidence people left behind. Tools, buildings, trash pits, art. Anything material.
Okay.
The source points out that in North America and Asia, it's usually seen as a core part of anthropology. Sometimes it's even called the anthropology of the past.
But you mentioned there's a difference depending on where you are.
Yes, and this is interesting. The source notes that in Europe, archaeology is often treated as a completely separate discipline.
Really?
Yeah. Or sometimes it's grouped more with history or paleontology rather than being under the main anthropology umbrella. It just shows how academic fields can develop differently in different places.
That's fascinating, how the same subject gets sliced up differently.
Yeah.
So, okay, this massive field, where did it actually begin? Let's trace the history a bit, based on the source.
Well, the word itself tells us something. It comes from Greek. Anthropos, meaning human.
And logos, study.
Right. The study of humans. The source mentions the word popping up in English way back in 1593, talking about history. But the meaning we use today, that really starts taking shape in Renaissance Germany. Thinkers like Hunt and Kasman.
Renaissance Germany. Wow, that feels quite early for what we think of as modern anthropology.
It does, doesn't it? But by the 17th century, you had scholars like the Bartholins defining it. They called it the science that treats of man. And they divided it into anatomy studying the body, and psychology studying the soul. Very different from the four fields we just talked about.
Definitely. So what happened in the 19th century, that seems to be when things really started shifting towards the anthropology we recognize now.
The 19th century was absolutely crucial. You start seeing the term used more for the natural history of humans, paleontology even.
Okay.
And importantly, academic chairs, like university positions specifically for anthropology, start getting created. France had one in 1850.
Ah, so it's becoming institutionalized.
Exactly. And you get the first organizations forming. Initially, some were quite focused on ideas about human races, which obviously became very problematic.
Right.
But interestingly, the source points out that some key early societies, like the American Ethnological Society or the Ethnological Society of London, were explicitly liberal for their time, anti-slavery, pro-human rights. They were already developing comparative methods.
And then Darwin published On the Origin of Species. The source calls that an epiphany. Why was it so huge for anthropology?
Yeah, Darwin. His ideas about evolution through natural selection provided this incredibly powerful framework. Many thinkers saw it as a way to understand not just biological life, but also the development and, the variation in human societies and cultures over time.
So it gave them a potential mechanism to explain diversity and change.
Precisely. It really spurred efforts to apply evolutionary thinking to human studies, for better or worse in some cases, but it was definitely a catalyst.
And that led to more formal anthropological societies.
Yes. You see the founding of groups like the Société d'Anthropologie de Paris in 1859. Paul Broca was key there, defining anthropology as the study of the human group, considered as a whole, which sounds much more like that holistic approach we talked about.
Getting closer.
Yeah. And you also had figures like Theodor Waitz in Germany pushing for a comparative empirical approach based on evidence. And importantly, he stressed the fundamental unity of the human species despite all the variation.
And this momentum just kept building.
It really did. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw this boom in societies, journals, departments all over the world, leading to things like the American Anthropological Association forming in 1902.
Now, the source does bring up a critical point here, a debate about the field's origins. It mentions the view that it served as a colonial science.
Yes, it does note that. The source makes it clear that the field's historical connections with colonialism and state power are a really significant area of debate and critical self-reflection within anthropology itself. It's something the discipline continues to grapple with.
Okay. So moving into the 20th century and beyond, the field just exploded, right? What does modern anthropology look like now?
Exploding is a good word for it. Massive expansion. Anthropology departments became common in universities everywhere. And it diversified into, dozens and dozens of subfields.
Wow.
And another key development was the rise of practical or applied anthropology, using anthropological knowledge, those methods we talked about, to actually solve specific real-world problems.
Like what kind of problem?
Well, the source gives a really compelling example. A forensic anthropologist using their expertise in human bones, osteology, to help identify victims in criminal investigations or mass disasters.
So it's not just purely academic theory. It has direct applications.
Increasingly so, yes. And it's become much more globalized, too. You have international organizations now like the WCAA, the AAA in the US, IESA in Europe, trying to connect researchers worldwide.
The source also mentions some key distinctions that emerged, especially after big figures like Franz Boas in the US and Malinowski in Britain.
Right. Boas and Malinowski were hugely influential. You had, for a time, a noticeable difference between British social anthropology and US cultural anthropology.
Which we mentioned earlier, they sort of merged into sociocultural.
Yeah, they've converged a lot over time into what we usually just call sociocultural now. But the important thing the source highlights is what set anthropology apart, and still does in many ways.
And that is
things like a strong emphasis on cross-cultural comparison, looking at similarities and differences across societies, and, maybe most distinctively, a commitment to long-term, in-depth fieldwork. Context is everything.
right, that immersion.
Exactly, and specifically, participant observation. That method where the researcher lives within the community they're studying, participating in daily life while systematically observing and recording.
That's the classic image of an anthropologist, isn't it? No book in hand, living somewhere unfamiliar.
It is a classic image, yeah. And that U.S. structure, the source mentions it again, it's still often framed around those four fields.
Biological, physical, sociocultural, archaeological, and linguistic.
Correct. The source reiterates that as a common way to organize things, especially in the U.S., and it stresses that while these fields often overlap and inform each other, they do tend to ask different questions and use different methods.
So putting it all together, how does the source describe the field today? What's its overall nature?
It's painted as this really unique global discipline. It manages to combine insights and approaches from the humanities, the social sciences, and the natural sciences, which is quite unusual.
Yeah, most fields stay in their lane.
Right. Anthropology tries to bridge them. It builds on what we learn about human origins, evolution, biology, but integrates that with our understanding of social relationships, cultural meanings, institutions, history.
Trying to see the whole human story.
Exactly. The source includes a great quote from Clifford Geertz. He called anthropology perhaps the last of the great 19th century conglomerate disciplines, still for the most part organizationally intact.
A conglomerate discipline. I like that.
He also called it a diffuse assemblage, sort of held together by academic structures, and maybe, he suggests, a bit of a romantic image of comprehensive scholarship.
That really captures that sprawling, slightly unwieldy, but fascinating nature of it. The source also mentions a big shift in thinking within the field itself, about knowledge.
Yes, an important epistemological shift, particularly in sociocultural anthropology, happened between the 1970s and 1990s.
Epistemological, meaning
Meaning how we think about knowledge itself, what counts as knowledge, how we produce it, how objective it can be. Sociocultural anthropology moved away from a more strictly positivist view, the idea that knowledge is just out there, objective, waiting to be discovered.
good.
It became more reflexive, focusing on the role of the researcher, power dynamics, how knowledge is constructed in specific contexts. Meanwhile, the source notes, archaeology and biological anthropology tended to remain more aligned with positivist approaches.
Interesting divergence there. So pulling back, again, what are the main takeaways, the basic trends across the whole field according to the source?
Okay, key trends highlighted are taking a holistic approach, trying to see interconnectedness, being highly empirical, really grounding conclusions in detailed observation and evidence. Conducting in-depth studies over significant periods of time, often using multiple methods, seeing a dynamic relationship between very specific local observations and broader compiled knowledge, and constantly using the comparative method, comparing across different cultures, societies, and time periods.
Okay, that gives us a really good framework.
Yeah.
Now let's get into some of the specifics. The source lists so many fascinating subfields. We probably can't cover them all, but maybe we can highlight a few that really show the range.
Good idea. Let's pick some that showcase different facets. On the sociocultural side, a really fundamental concept the source discusses is cultural relativism.
Ah, yes, that's about understanding cultures on their own terms, isn't it? Not judging them by our own standards.
Exactly that. It's the principle that you should try to understand beliefs and practices within their specific cultural context before making judgments. The source emphasizes it's crucial for avoiding bias and simplistic comparisons when looking across cultures, a core ethical and methodological stance.
And closely linked to that is ethnography, right? You mentioned participant observation.
Yes, ethnography is central. It's both the process of doing that long-term immersive field work, the participant observation.
Living with the community.
Right. And it's also the product, usually a detailed written account, like a book or monograph, that comes out of that research, aiming to provide a rich, nuanced understanding of that specific cultural world.
So it's about depth and nuance, not just quick surveys. Okay, what about something really fundamental like kinship? How families and relationships are structured?
Kinship is a classic anthropological topic because, well, it's a human universal. Every society has rules and patterns for defining family, descent, marriage.
But they vary hugely, right?
Hugely. And anthropologists study that variation, how descent is traced through the mother's line, father's line, both, what marriage rules exist, what counts as family. The source even mentions the distinction between consanguinity or blood ties and the idea of chosen family, people you form close, kin-like bonds with who aren't biological relatives.
Which is very relevant today.
Very. It shows kinship is as much about social and cultural construction as it is about biology.
That's a great example of anthropology unpacking something we might take for granted. What about economics? Does anthropology look at that?
Absolutely. Economic anthropology. It started out looking a lot at things like gift giving, reciprocity, non-market economies in smaller scale societies. Think Malinowski and Massus on the gift.
Okay.
But it's evolved way beyond that. Now, economic anthropologists bring a critical lens to, well, all economic systems. The source mentions recent work focusing on things like corporations, banks, global finance, applying anthropological methods like ethnography to understand the cultures within those institutions.
Doing ethnography in a Wall Street bank, that sounds fascinating and challenging.
Definitely a different kind of field work, but it yields unique insights into how those systems actually operate on a human level.
Let's jump to something that connects biology and culture. You mentioned biocultural anthropology earlier.
Yes, this is a really important area. It directly explores that interplay between human biology and culture. The source highlights a key shift here. moving away from older, often racist ideas about fixed biological differences between groups,
Why?
towards understanding how culture actively shapes our biology. Think about diet, subsistence strategies, social stress, exposure to disease. These cultural and environmental factors have profound biological effects over time, influencing everything from growth patterns to disease susceptibility.
So culture isn't just layered on top of biology, they're intertwined.
Deeply intertwined, that's the core message.
And looking way back in time, archaeology,
Yeah.
what's a specific example from paleoanthropology that the source mentions?
Paleoanthropology combines fossil studies with physical anthropology to understand our ancient ancestors. The source gives a concrete example, studying the teeth of Homo luzonensis, an ancient human species found in the Philippines.
What can teeth tell us?
A surprising amount. By looking at the size, shape, wear patterns, even the chemical isotopes in the enamel, researchers can infer things about their diet, behavior, maybe even developmental patterns. Those tiny details in fossils help piece together the big picture of human evolution.
It's amazing how much information can be gleaned from something like a tooth. Really brings the past closer.
It does. It shows how anthropology uses very specific empirical data to tackle these huge questions about who we are and where we came from.
This all naturally leads to thinking about responsibility, doesn't it? Studying people, especially their past and their present lives. The source mentions ethics quite a bit.
Yes, ethics is a huge consideration. The source notes that professional anthropological associations have developed pretty detailed ethical codes. These are meant to guide researchers in their responsibilities, primarily towards the people they study, but also towards the discipline and even their own safety. Protecting subjects is paramount.
And you mentioned earlier the field grapples with its own history, the colonial connections.
Absolutely. The source is clear that this is an ongoing, critical discussion. It explicitly mentions the debate about whether and how anthropology was involved with, or even used by, colonial powers and state policies. It's not a settled issue, but acknowledged as a crucial part of the field's history to confront.
There have been other ethical controversies too, haven't there? Particularly around involvement with military or intelligence agencies.
Yes, the source touches on a history here. It mentions Franz Boas, a founding figure, strongly objecting to anthropologists acting as spies during World War I.
Wow.
Then, contrastingly, many anthropologists did work in intelligence during World War II. Later, there were concerns about surveillance during the Cold War and significant anti-war activism among anthropologists during the Vietnam War.
And more recently.
More recently, the source details the controversy around the U.S. military's Human Terrain System, or HTS program, in Iraq and Afghanistan. This involved embedding social scientists, including anthropologists, with military units.
That sounds ethically complicated.
Extremely. The source reports on the American Anthropological Association's investigation. Their conclusion, as presented in the source, was that the HTS program was fundamentally incompatible with anthropological ethics.
Why was that?
The AAA report cited several reasons. The military mission potentially determining the research agenda, a lack of proper informed consent and potential harm to local populations, the inability to ensure confidentiality, and the generally coercive environment. It highlights the ongoing tension and debate within the field about engagement with powerful institutions, especially the military.
So these are not easy questions the field is asking itself.
Not at all. They are complex and constantly being debated.
Okay, so we've covered this incredible scope, the history, the methods, the subfields, even the tough ethical debates. Let's bring it back to the listener. What does all this mean for you? Why should you care about this deep dive into anthropology today?
Well, one key point the source makes is that anthropology isn't just about studying faraway places anymore. It increasingly studies topics and peoples very close to the author's home, as the source puts it.
Studying Western societies, you mean cities, institutions.
Exactly. Studying urban life, migration, corporations, science labs, NGOs, online communities, the connections between different places in our globalized world. Anthropology is turning its lens onto all aspects of contemporary life, everywhere.
So connecting back to you, our listener, this matters because understanding this huge range of human behavior, biology, culture, society, past and present, is really fundamental to understanding ourselves and the incredibly diverse, complex world we all live in now.
It really is. Anthropology offers this unique perspective, doesn't it? It's holistic, trying to see the bigger picture. It's deeply comparative, showing us the vast range of human possibility. And it's grounded in that rich, empirical, often long-term research.
Which helps you move beyond simple answers or stereotypes.
Precisely. It equips you with tools to think critically about things like globalization, social inequality, health disparities, conflict, environmental issues, technology, by providing context, showing different perspectives, highlighting the many ways people navigate the world and make meaning in their lives.
It feels like it really challenges assumptions about what's normal or natural for humans by showing just how incredibly varied we are.
That's a great way to put it. It encourages critical thinking about human experience in all its fascinating, sometimes contradictory complexity.
Well, that was quite a journey through the sprawling, multifaceted world of anthropology, from its Greek name origins to its modern subfields and critical debates.
Yeah, we've really only been able to, scratch the surface of what's in this rich source material you provided. But hopefully we've pulled out some of the key ideas and given you a good sense of the field.
Absolutely. It's truly incredible how much ground it covers. You really get that conglomerate discipline feeling.
Thinking about it, one thing the source mentions is how biological anthropologists, for example, are interested in both human universals.
Things potentially shared by all humans.
Right. Behaviors, cognitive abilities, maybe certain social patterns, things found across virtually all cultures. But they're also intensely interested in human variation, the biological and cultural differences between groups and individuals.
That tension again between what might unite us all and what makes us so diverse.
Exactly. And that, perhaps, leaves us with a final thought for you to consider after this deep dive.
Okay.
In a world that often feels incredibly polarized and divided, what does this anthropological focus, this insistence on looking at both the profound depth of cultural variation and the possibility of underlying human universals, tell us about our shared humanity? What can we learn from holding both those ideas at the same time?
That's a perfect question to ponder, a great place to leave it. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring and keep questioning.